Okay. Good. All right, welcome everybody. Today is Thursday, June 20th, 2024. It's 1:01 p.m. We're convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We're meeting today at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We're going to begin with a roll call. I'm Rebecca Nielsen, Board President.
Jennifer Partridge, Vice President.
Lacey Boyce, Board Member.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Harry McKay, Board Member.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Thank you so much. We'll excuse Meg Van Wagenen, who is ill. Is she dialing in? Does anybody know? Okay.
I haven't heard any watch.
Okay, so we excuse Meg and hope she feels better. And Wendy will be here shortly. Superintendent Dow will be here shortly, so we'll expect her soon. Okay, is there a motion to convene our study session today?
I move that we convene the study session.
I second.
Thank you. Motion made by Board Member Partridge, second by Board Member Hales. We're now in our study session. Okay, we have one item of business today at all, which is facilities, specifically our Dixon building and where we're going to go with that building. So, everybody got an email from Wendy with a bunch of information on there. And Wendy was going to talk about that, and she's not here. So, I would still like to start with that email and go over, let's start with the Dixon Site Information document.
Those need to be attached.
Yeah, do we need to attach those to board docs? I was wondering the same thing.
I can. I'd like you to.
I will do that. I'm not sure. I don't see why not. Okay. And I did ask everyone ahead of time to send me their preferences and whatnot. I didn't really hear from anyone, but I think we'll discuss, no, you're fine. I think we'll discuss everything anyways. So I guess we can start with this document. Do you feel comfortable maybe taking us through it, Devin? Or
No, we
okay.
could, or we could also start with the presentation we did with the community meetings that we talked about that has the needs as just basic high-level overview of what we feel are our priorities for the next few years, and then go back to this more specific.
Okay, let's do that actually. Are you okay?
I am
broadcasting on TV?
I have it up on my screen, so.
And did everybody get a chance to attend one of those meetings? We've all seen it and are familiar with it, right? So this will just be a review for each one of us. So I think we can do the 10-minute version rather than the 40-minute meeting version.
And you guys can ask all the questions and we'll just go from where we started talking about our priorities. So okay, so we'll just go through on this. So the top priorities before 2030 were to finish the Timpey rebuild and to determine what to do with Dixon. And then the other two were Westridge and Canyon Crest and better usage of the other spaces. So when we go down to the Dixon site, some of and this is, we'll include some of the additional comments the public made. So they wanted to make sure that it was still a space for students, and I think Gina even commented about how nice it is to have the students at the Boys and Girls Club using the site for their summer program and, really nice. And running around the school. So that's probably one of the top things we heard. I did hear from a couple of people just to build another school, and I mean, I'm always hesitant to just build another school when our other schools are a little bit underutilized, but that was one of the comments that was made. The community doesn't want it sold to a developer, which we heard quite a bit from people, and that's one of the things that they're worried about, is just creating more places for high density housing and making sure that doesn't happen. So right now it is being used for Boys and Girls Club. We signed the MOU from June of 2024 to June of 2026, because I think everybody knows that construction delays are inevitable, and we didn't want to shortchange them on the time that they could use it if they needed it. They're using 6 classrooms, the library, cafeteria, and storage space. They're also using the outside. Any additional, which we have also talked to them about, is any additional evening activities that they wanna use other places will just be an additional rental. And then the adult ed is using it. The front office, the bathrooms there in the front are the one spaces that are being used for the staff bathrooms and some of the staff area and adult ed, and then the kids' bathrooms, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, they're the ones over by the cafeteria and the auditorium. I hadn't said the and, but those two. Oh, hello. Wendy Dow came at 1:07. So the auditorium is something that could be rented. We're pretty close to being able to use move all the rentals to the district. We're hoping sometime in the next realistically about the next 6 weeks is what we're looking at, and then being able to use that green space still. And we've been told that the tennis courts are still being used by the Utah Valley Tennis. I haven't witnessed it.
I think last I heard from my friend who's got a kid in the club.
So
do you see it, Gina?
I don't know who was they don't have a sign saying who they are, but there's at least one organization that uses it.
And then
But
some
my
of
guess
those
is they've never paid to use it.
They just use it,
They just use it.
Probably.
my guess is you're probably right. But I also, since the rentals have been not centralized, the schools have been able to do their own, we haven't really seen it. We don't know who's actually paying for the rentals and following the policy to fill out the rental agreement and file the usage. So we have that indemnification.
Can I ask a question on that?
Of course.
So like, say there's somebody that's just using it to do Utah Valley Tennis. We don't know for sure, but let's say they haven't signed an agreement or anything and somebody got hurt. Should that come on us?
It's possible, because we have not, it's because they have not signed an agreement, which is why we try to push so hard to make sure that all agreements are in place so they understand what our responsibilities are.
If they haven't signed something, then probably
I'm not sure what's on the tennis courts over there. The closest I've gotten is the parking lot. So.
Is it generally true though, like anywhere, that if someone's using a district facility like a tennis court or a playground, that they have their own, we're not liable for them? Like how does it work actually?
It is correct, yes, for the most part, if they're using it, but if they're using it as an organization, it's just safer to have those rental agreements in place. Risk management really prefers to make sure those are in place, so there's a signed indemnification.
If you don't have an approved policy that says this is how we do things, and it isn't your established procedure for how people access those things, then they could technically argue, well, I didn't know, and so, whereas if you have that procedure and then someone violates it, it's on them. Because one of the pieces of rental agreements is they have to have an insurance policy.
Right.
We don't cover that. They're not allowed to rent unless they have an insurance
So
policy.
even Boys and Girls Club had to provide a general liability coverage with us named as an additional insured. So some of the discussions that Wendy's had, and maybe I'll just let you take over because this is what we talked about in the meetings with some of the uses, some of the ideas of what Dixon could be used for. And this is just our presentation, that's where we were kind of starting it.
Oh, that's great. We had talked about possibly using the space as a career and technical education center, and we have a lot of spaces that don't have a home. So this could become a space where we put all of those into a permanent location. So one would be our CAPS program, and we could actually expand it and add 2 strands to it, which I've talked with Clay about. The other is adult education program. It's not the adult ed, but the community ed and the ESL classes are currently at the Dixon site. But adult ed is in a portable at Independence High School. We could move that into that location. And we could also move East Bay Post High into that location. And Clay has kind of done some preliminary drawings about what he feels like that could look like, and believes that all of the space that he would need in highlighting some of those career and technical education programs, like a diesel program is a big deal. We have an auto program, we don't have a diesel certification program. And that our students have to travel quite far for, and that's a very high paying job out of the gate that could benefit a lot of our students. An aviation program, we've talked about that, especially with our partnership with UVU. And so being able to put some of those things where MTech either is providing those, but it's far away and so it's not accessible. If you notice, the Provost Center is mostly geared towards like medical, all of the medical strands, and so this would add in some other pieces. So we talked about that. We also talked about adding an education strand in that, and that would allow us to provide concurrent enrollment classes for students and a daycare at the same time. We do have that capacity at Timpview as well. We could actually potentially have 2 sites for that. We do have some space at Timpview where that could be a possibility in that space as well. So just kind of talking about that being a need. Also, we have a need for a district office. Like that legitimately is a concern. We are spread over a variety of facilities. And then we also have, you can keep moving to the next slide now. Oh, good job, you're projecting. And we could also use it as, you know, if you're gonna utilize, you could utilize a current elementary school as a district office and then move an elementary school there. That, I mean, certainly people are aware that that's a possibility. But one of the benefits of doing CTE programs at that site is it actually would alleviate some of the population pressures at the secondary level. We also even talked about expanding it in our MTSS leadership team into providing some CTE courses for 7th and 8th grade. That would become a feeder program for it, and so that could alleviate some of those situations at our middle schools. We would have to provide the transportation, so that's a cost we would have to look at.
That's pretty much all that's on there. The need at the East Bay is about 12,000
square feet. Okay,
what we currently have.
Perfect.
So when we're in that conversation, that can be something
that would be great.
Okay. Great. Okay, so that gives everyone a quick refresher on what we can include and what currently is happening there, right? And what we need. Should we look at these other documents real quick together? The MTech programs, just kind of, I had a couple questions on this. So they are currently providing these programs to our students at a really reduced cost, right?
It's free for high school students.
Free for high school students, okay. If we provide some of these programs on our own, that's not free,
That's what I was
right?
gonna ask.
Because that is an extra cost?
So it would be a cost for the teacher.
For the teacher, but it would still be through MTech? Would we have MTech people come to this?
We could do it either way. So if we wanted to do a partnership with MTech, we could do it that way, but one of the benefits to this as well is you probably would be able to have, say for example, a diesel mechanics program in between the 3 high schools. You could fund an entire teacher. It would cost an FTE. But recognizing that some of those students are sitting in other classes right now, and so if we brought them in, because they're not going to MTech currently because of how far away it is.
I think
But
this program is only up in Lehigh. Right?
Yeah, it is.
But the cost of something like some kind of diesel program is not just teacher,
Correct.
but it's like equipment and all sorts of stuff, right?
And Clay's pretty convinced that if we partnered with different groups and with grant funding, he can get it funded. So that doesn't seem to stress him out too much.
Okay.
Can I ask a question then about the medical assisting one? So at Timpview anyway, when you do their medical assisting program, you're not at MTech.
It's
Just
not
at
MTech's
Timpview.
program, right? Is it MTech's program? Or
I
is it
don't know
our
that.
program?
I don't know the answer
It's
to that
not.
question.
It might be a CTE class. It is.
It's just a
CTE course.
CTE
I think it's a
course.
CTE pathway.
Yes.
So it's not through MTech, is
So
it?
that's what I'm saying, like, I guess I don't, like it says here on the programs, we're not using that right now for our CTE program.
Yeah, we are using it for some of our students, but that's kind of the point, is that some of our students don't wanna go to the Provo campus. So if there's a teacher on site, you would just utilize that
And is
teacher
that
on site.
just because then Provo High doesn't have an MA program, is that it? Is that
I
why
don't
we
know
use?
if Provo High has an
Cause
MA
I'm like,
program.
who uses MTech if it's free at Timpview at that school, then is it not free at Provo High?
No, it's always free for the students, no matter if they're taking it at MTech or here. The student isn't.
Right, but they're not going to MTech, that's what I'm saying, if you're at Timpview High School, so is it
Provo High
at
does not have an MA program.
Okay,
I'm
so
pretty sure
they're
they don't
maybe
have
going
one.
to
Yes,
MTech.
so they
That's what
might
I'm
be the
trying to
ones
understand.
going to MTech.
Jared?
No,
Okay,
they
I don't
don't,
know.
but there are some medical terminology, different type of courses, but they're not affiliated. They're CTE courses.
Okay. Okay, I'm just trying to tease out, right, like what are we already doing? What
So-
would we do differently?
So some of those courses, and the question that I would have is the one at Timpview a CE course though? Cause if
No.
it's not, then, see,
don't
this
think
is a CE course, so this is giving you credit beyond that because it's at MTech.
Yeah, and I
So there
don't know
could
if
be
it is or
students
isn't.
that are taking that course that may not qualify to take a CE course, and so they're taking that at Timpview instead. So I would need to do
Yeah,
some research
I
on
don't,
that
I
piece
should
of
know,
it.
cause two of my kids have their MA from that program, but I don't know.
Clay not able to join us?
He was
Yeah.
not, he's out of town, yeah.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions for Clay.
Yeah.
I do know that the Provo campus for MTech, like if we're talking about getting CTE offerings, they are in the process of remodeling and they have a lot of
Lot of
extra
stuff
space that
planned,
goes
yeah.
up. So
That's a good point, they do.
if there is things that they wanna put in our campus that they might be putting at the Provo campus, I don't wanna overlap
No,
those.
we don't, no.
That was my same thing. I don't wanna offer all these courses.
No.
When, and
So-
pay for all the, you know, the
Well, you
equipment
notice
and
that
everything
that's
when-
why at the Provo campus, he doesn't have anything highlighted, cause he
Okay.
doesn't wanna duplicate anything that's
Okay.
happening there.
Yeah,
So the
something like
ones
the
to
data,
duplicate
yeah,
might
like the
be-
data analytics that just got approved,
Yep.
literally
Like
6
this
weeks
year,
ago.
yeah.
Okay, so.
So the ones we want are the most highly sought after, the highlighted ones are the
Yeah.
most highly sought after and the hardest ones for our students to get to.
Cause
So
you're
those are the ones
cause you're
that make
competing
sense.
with, yes, cause you're
Okay.
competing with Nevo and Alpine for a set number of spaces.
Yeah.
If we offer it at ours, it would be exclusively for our students.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
And I think they're building a Payson campus, which
Yes,
is
they
enclose
are.
the Spanish Fork campus,
Okay.
which is gonna be bigger, so I don't know if they're gonna add more to the Spanish Fork.
But further, for
But
our
it-
students.
Right.
Okay.
But it's right off the freeway,
Okay.
so.
But that's even farther away,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is.
Yeah. I don't see aviation's not an MTech thing.
No.
right?
No.
Okay. Okay.
That would be a partnership with UVU or
Or
SUU.
Duncan
Yeah.
or who?
SUU,
Oh.
Cedar Valley High School does theirs with SUU and not UVU.
But they're switching over, or they already have, remember, because UVU got mad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're in a public meeting. They didn't get mad, but they wanted, they
Wanted
wanted
that-
Cedar Valley to, because they were closer to them, they wanted them to partner with them. So I think if they haven't already, they're moving to UVU.
Okay, where's Cedar Valley High School? 'Cause I was.
Eagle Mountain, the
Eagle-
back
okay.
side
I
of
was
Eagle
thinking
Mountain.
Cedar City.
Outside district.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's
Okay.
not the front, it's like way,
Way out there.
It's towards Tooele.
Yeah.
That direction.
Okay. Okay. Cause I was thinking a high school in Cedar City makes so much sense to partner with SUU, so why is
Yeah.
UVU
What?
getting involved?
it was the program.
Okay, yeah, no, I get it now, cause it's over here, it's not
Valley.
in Cedar City.
Eagle.
Okay. Yeah, right, okay, Cedar Valley and Eagle Mountain, got it. Okay. And, yeah, I guess this is a question for Clay, like, setting up these programs, I just am so curious about cost and et cetera.
Cause and like I looked at his kind of the drawing that he did, you know? And I guess I don't know the Dixon site well enough and the history around which parts of that building can and can't be used versus
There's
would
some-
need to be completely rebuilt.
Like all the back areas.
Yeah, I just.
Speak to that.
It wouldn't be worth it to
I-
reuse the building.
No.
Any part of the building.
No.
If you're gonna do something, you're gonna.
Okay, so we're not talking about ways to try to run, cause I'm like, I keep hearing things like that boiler can't be fixed and then we could put CTE there and in my brain I thought you were saying in that building.
No, I'm
Okay.
saying
Great.
this is where you
On the
really
site.
could design a building on the site
I see.
to meet the
Gotcha.
needs of the district
Mhm.
based on that.
Okay.
I think there are individuals obviously that have a lot of sentimentality towards that and feel very connected to that building. But I think there are some ways when you think about how architects and builders can come in and they can design things so that it
So the
honors,
facade
that it
has stayed
honors
true.
the,
Yes,
yes,
right?
that it
Yeah.
honors
Like
the
for the-
history of that,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
We did have were you here? I can't remember. We did have a conversation with the architects
Yes, we
about,
did.
were you
I wasn't
involved?
here yet.
Okay, about literally making it look like the current
Yeah,
building, like
yeah.
even literally using some of the same bricks or some of the same
Yeah.
pieces,
Facade.
concrete pieces on the facade or whatever, so.
And I've tried to prepare the people in my area and anyone else, I get contacted by people outside of my area as well when it comes to Dixon, and prepare them that we likely won't be able to keep the building unless we wanna pay probably 20 million more to refurbish it, and yeah, I just don't, I don't see it being financially feasible for us to do that.
I think 20 million is a really low estimate of what that would cost when you're just thinking about the boiler in and of itself. I have no idea how that would.
I think that, I could be remembering correctly, cause I do that a lot now, but I had a lot of conversations with the architects,
Okay,
and that was
the
it
number
was,
that they
well,
gave.
they threw out a couple of numbers, and that's what I remember, but that does not mean that's what they
Okay,
told
fair.
me, but that's what I remember.
I think what it was 20 million over the cost of whatever.
Correct, you're right, 20 million more than if they had just torn it down, yeah.
So is that something I feel like we can establish right now, is that we are talking about a completely new building?
Yes.
Everyone's okay with, and on board with that? Okay. Okay.
And I just wanna emphasize again, I think if it's not cost prohibitive, having it look very similar, like they did with Provo Peaks, I think we have public watching, we do want to preserve what we can.
I would love to.
I would love
Yeah, I
that.
think that would be
I
great.
love the look of the Dixon building. I know there were other board members before, I
Well,
think past that said they hate the look of it, but I love it.
Improve it to go back to, with the safety
Yes.
features that we have
Yep.
now to make
Right.
it look like when it first opened without
Absolutely.
like.
The additions,
add on to the
the
add-on to
additions
the
did
add-on.
not.
Yeah, it just didn't
Yeah.
do itself justice.
But, I mean, with the caveat that it's not cost prohibitive, right? If it's gonna cost
Right.
us millions more, then I think we need to just go with a completely new building. I'm probably gonna get in trouble for that, but I think we need to be careful with our money. But if it is possible, and if we can, if it's not too much to reuse some of the brick and all of that, then I'd like for us to look at that.
Same, I completely agree with you on that. Okay, and I
So,
think that's something that we
I
all
have a
agree on.
question about the CTE programs. Are we seeing, like, our CTE programs in our high schools right now are so overcrowded that we don't have room for them?
I think the issue is that we're not offering CTE programs in the areas that are actually producing high paying jobs. So we have CTE programs based on.
My question is, are we looking at maybe substituting those FTEs into this, and then we would take away other
Possibly,
CTE
depending on what the
These are just
interest
things
is.
that I would
Yep.
be interested in, cause like if we're holding on to a FTE that's only doing 6 people, that doesn't seem feasible.
That's right.
Well, and our
So-
CAPS program doesn't always have a lot of enrollment.
That
That
was
second
the other
semester
thing.
of the year, and so I do feel like we have to make sure that the
Yeah.
cost is justified by the need. And I know there's a need to have a space, and that what we have may or may not last a long time, we don't know in terms of space. But I also know that we don't have really high enrollment in that program yet, consistently. Like, we have more that first semester, but not that second semester. And maybe it's because we're not hitting all the right areas with the highest paying jobs, or maybe it's that some students don't wanna leave their campus to go to another campus partway through the day, all of which I feel like we would need some data on
Well, they have to
before.
make room for 2 class periods for
Mhm.
it.
That's right, like there are a few barriers, I think, to it, and so I would wanna look at those before we invested in something targeted mostly at our CTE work. I like it combined with other needs being met, but like, the number of people impacted by our district office, for example, to me is maybe seems greater, I hate to say that, but then the benefit of this versus what we're offering right now. Do you know what I'm saying? I know it's an
Absolutely.
additional benefit, but I also feel like we can ramp up what we're doing right now even with what we have. But anyway, just thinking that.
I agree, and I do think a multi-use facility would be good, so CTE, but with some other things. A lot of this is, right, speculative, and I think we're not gonna know, we're gonna have to take a leap of faith no matter what we do with the building. but, except maybe district office, except leap of faith that the community isn't gonna come after us. But, I think we're gonna pull back in students who are currently not enrolled in our district for whatever reason, because we're offering programs in a manner that they like, right? And there's a campus, I actually think we're gonna eventually over time recoup some students. As I participate in the innovations group thing that I'm a part of, we visit and we talk to the other districts. They have, Jordan district I think has 2 current campuses that are full, and they're building a 3rd. We're behind, right?
CTE
We're behind.
campuses.
CTE campuses, we're behind. Like, I'm not, and in saying that, I'm not saying I'm only gonna vote for CTE to be there, but I do think that's something, if we can offer programs that are well thought out and a nice new building, I actually think we're gonna fill them, but I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong.
I think we might need to look at some districts that have those things that are maybe more of a similar size to us, like if you look at Ogden District and their tech center and some of the things that they offer and how they also coordinate with Weaver State and what does, are there other places and when you look at like our post-secondary participation rate should be a lot higher than it is, particularly in our CTE pathways. And my concern also is I want to break down that data to look at, are students actually taking courses in CTE pathways that are leading to careers that are going to go somewhere? So just because you're taking a sequence of these 3 courses, is it likely that they're going to do something with it? And is it more likely if we could get better programs in place? And remember that programs are also teacher driven, right? Like if you get a really good teacher into a program, right, like you're gonna grow that program. If we struggle to find the right educators for that, the program's gonna struggle. So that's another piece of that we need to take into account is how are we recruiting the best individuals for that.
Can I just get clarification on something you just said? When you say are they taking these courses and then where it actually leads to something, are you saying where they actually go into that profession, or are you saying where they actually have the ability to go into a profession that pays well? Because I like the idea of having the CTE courses and the kids using it in their future, but it's also I think a really great way for kids to explore stuff,
yes,
right?
sure.
So I like if a kid takes all these marketing classes but doesn't go into marketing, I don't find that problematic. No. So is that what you're looking at? Are you looking at how many people actually go into those programs?
I think that can be a very important thing because what I'm concerned about is I'm just taking this pathway because I get a CTE court at graduation, but it's not, and then I just graduate and then I'm gonna go get a job at some place that just pays minimum wage. Like to me that's not success, right?
Yeah.
To me it is build that skill set so that they're doing something that then they can earn more money as a result of the skills that they build from it. So
Gina.
I love data, you guys know that. I want to see those numbers. I don't know if we're gonna get those numbers in the I don't know if we can get the information that we need to really make a good decision on this in the timeline that we need.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do with this.
Jennifer.
So Melanie and Lisa vocalized a lot of the questions and concerns I had come to the meeting about. I see value in the CTE courses, but are we gonna get, do we put in a huge investment? Is it benefiting enough students in enough ways to make it worth it? And I also, and I think I need to understand better what does the school day look like for a typical student who's doing that, right? But it sounds like we're gonna have to have more busing and things like that, and so it's gonna be a bigger investment. And I think whether it's CTE or whatever we end up deciding for the site, like how does this, what's gonna fit with our strategic plan that we are, our focus, our mission, our vision, the best.
I'd love to see one of those tech, I'd love would probably help me to go visit.
So and this is not gonna be, the kids aren't gonna be on this campus full time, right? This is like an in and out, like part of your day.
Well,
Usually 2 periods is usually what they take.
It's like CAPS, they're only
Right.
there on like
Okay.
Monday and Wednesday.
Okay.
Right. Tuesday, Thursday.
A day or B
A day or
day.
B day, right, okay.
Just A.
I have a question about, this might be too far down the road, but
this might mean Provo and Tyndale and the Dixon will all have to be on the same schedule.
Yes,
They
you're
will
right.
have to be on it, same
Yep.
A day, B day,
Yep.
same time for
Yep.
each class.
If we were to do the 7th and 8th graders too, would we have to do that with Dixon right now? Shoreline is a 7-period day versus.
So Shoreline,
Mhm.
Shoreline and Centennial would have to go
Centennial would
to
have
the
the
same
same
schedule
schedule.
also as the high schools if you were gonna extend it to that. And I don't necessarily think that I would recommend that at this point. I think you start with your high schools and then you start to see where are the gaps that are existing at the middle school level, because when we look at some of the CTE course offerings that are happening at the middle school level, I'd like to see some pathways expanded that we don't currently have that are prohibiting our kids from accessing really high levels of coursework in that field. So.
I also just wanna say with the CAPS program, I remember when we first introduced it, we really talked about what a benefit it is to have it at the New Skin building, that the students can be there and have that experience of being in a professional environment and picture themselves there. And we are trying to build community partnerships, and I think it's really good that we have that. I recognize that any community partner things could change and we might have to have a new arrangement at some point. So it is good to be prepared if that were to happen, but I also don't love the idea that we're like, okay, we gotta find a spot for CAPS, because I do think it's really good to have them in that professional environment where they're at right now.
I don't disagree with you, but I think part of the feeling of urgency there is that complete lack of contract we have with them. We don't have any guarantee.
They could kick us out tomorrow.
Yeah. And I do know, like, when we went up to the one that was in Heber, that's not in a professional setting. It's in a school setting.
It's in the basement of the Utah State Extension.
Right.
And then Provo City or Park City CAPS in their own high school library.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I know it
So-
still can be plenty successful not. I love the New Skin environment too. I think it's very real world. It's really cool. But I think also we could design a space that is as cool and looks as cool. I mean, the one in Heber is pretty darn
It's amazing.
neat as far as the way it looks. It looks like a business.
Even though it's inside the school, but
Right.
it's inside a university extension. So-
I don't disagree with you. I like it at New Skin. I love it at New Skin. I just think the urgency there is there's no guarantee we can stay ever at all.
Clay indicated on that document too, I don't know if you saw his comments, but he didn't feel like there was enough space for them and that they actually do need a larger space for them to work, a maker space.
Well, in that space, they kinda had to work around what space they were given.
Right, but when you
And
have
if
the
you
chance
were
to
to have the
design
chance
it.
to design it, you would build it differently, I think.
Lisa?
One question I have is around enrollment at Centennial and Shoreline. Centennial feels very crowded if you're in those halls and in that building during the day, and I haven't been there a lot in the last 3 years, but 4 years ago I was there basically almost every day.
That was the height of
Yeah,
their,
and
it's not
you,
as
I was
much.
gonna say, it was so overcrowded, and every room and those portables so ridiculously overcrowded. And no central space at all ever, like it, so I just also would like to hear people address, like, is there a potential need to shift or adjust, or anyone thinking about things like, we're gonna move 9th grade, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wanna make sure we're talking about our middle school population in this space as well. Like, what do people anticipate? I remember Todd McKee saying, you know, his recommendation that he, a couple years ago, around moving 9th grade down with junior high, et cetera. Anyway, so I just also would like to hear people's thoughts about that, cause I feel like we wouldn't wanna eliminate an option to solve that problem if we need it or if it is a problem.
I think your boundary and feasibility study is gonna show you that probably some shifting of some boundaries may be also helpful.
Would help with that.
I think that's a big part of the problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Coming in here, it's like, Dixon is underutilized, Centennial is overutilized, there's a problem, right? It's not that we don't have enough space, it's that we let too many people into that side. We need to readjust things and get it moving back the other direction.
But I think if you look at the two combined, to me it feels like the right population
Okay.
still for two
Okay.
schools.
If I'm remembering right, I feel like, and someone out there maybe who remembers more, I feel like we identified that there was like 225 additional seats above what our population is projected to be
Yeah,
over the
Doug
next.
gave us that
Yeah.
information a while ago.
Yeah, and
At
so it
Centennial
was.
or
He said
At
Across,
Shoreline.
no, across the
Across the
two
two.
things, so if you adjust the boundaries, you would still have flexibility for 200 plus students, and so that was
Okay.
part of the reasoning of not considering an additional middle school, right?
But I do think, one of the things I've been thinking about along the lines with Lisa is there a way, and this is way down the road, but whatever we decide to do, as long as it, barring district office or something like that, is there a way that we can creatively talk with the architects so that if we do, if not even us, we're not gonna be on the board, if there's ever a third
Right.
district, it won't be when, I mean a third middle school, it won't be when we're on the board. Is there a way that we can design it so that if it's ever needed in the future, we, you know, the future boards would have that option rather than, I really hate sometimes that we have to make decisions because past boards didn't have the foresight. Not that, I'm not trying to blame them, but it's just, I would like as a board for us to be thinking creatively so that if this does need to be an option, we're giving that option to, we're giving other options to future boards.
I'm also wondering, kind of along those lines, is if you identify your highest needs areas like for CTE, and those are the ones you start with East Bay, Post High, you know, those spaces that you need, and then you're designing it in such a way that if you are starting to see an increase in that, then you can start to do additions onto that, and there would already be kind of a plan for how to do that, because that allows for that 10, 20-year plan to be much more, you know, and just much smarter than you know, than if we say, well, we're just gonna anticipate that all of these programs are needed and that we're gonna need a ton of kids. I do think Clay has some pretty good data on programs that are requested and that students end up not signing up for because of transportation issues and things like that, and so we need to get access to that to help you make, you know, a good decision about what that might look like. I did wanna comment on your question, Jennifer, about how does this fit in with, you know, making sure it fits in with our strategic plan. Anything that's gonna help us with that post-secondary readiness indicator, cause that is our second major goal in that, and the two groups that we're really failing students in are multilingual students and our special education students. The Utah Policy Education Center is doing a study right now that shows that there are specific CTE programs that are designed that really help multilingual and special education students. Diesel is one of those programs that becomes a really big deal. And several, I shouldn't say several, a very innovative school in Colorado tied it also to adult ed where parents could get their commercial driver's license so that they could drive semis basically. And really it's not that they're gonna become a truck driver. I was unaware that most truck drivers that are employed work during the day and they travel literally in Utah between Brigham City and like St. George. And they make over $100,000 a year to do so. And the fact that, you know, an 18-year-old can't get a CDL, but if we're collaborating and some of those kids that are going through and getting adult ed and we could get them a CDL at the same time, we could also use that for our own bus drivers. So just some thoughts there about how to really try to layer different pieces on this so we're serving lots of different elements of our community. Might be helpful.
And just to revisit our Grandview school and land, like help me know why it would be a better idea to invest the money in it. Is it because we don't wanna just leave Dixon without a plan versus leaving Grandview as it is? Cause I feel like Grandview also doesn't feel like it has a plan up there in that neighborhood.
I've always said that Grandview Hills should be the district office. It's a better place for that.
It's not a great place for high traffic, for sure.
One centralized, it's the great thing about Dixon, it's right by all of them, like people could take buses there, there's just.
And they're going
it's
to
central.
expand UVX on 5th West, which is 2 blocks from Dixon. this station will be 2 blocks from Dixon.
Is that for sure, Terry? Are there, or is that in the work? Like, I mean, that's
It's in the
UTA,
plans.
yeah, UTA has said.
Has it in their plans?
Mhm.
Awesome.
So that's we want, and I think part of the reason they don't want they can't have a school there is because, like a bigger school there, is because the entrance and exits
Yeah.
was too, on Grandview was
Yeah.
too small, so I think that was part of the
Right.
problem.
Without having
A
to
hard
eminent
corridor
domain
to
some
come out.
homes up there
Okay.
and stuff, so, which we could do, but.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, cause I
Yeah,
don't
no, that's a
know
good
the
question.
history of it, and I'm just thinking of like our needs and our resources
I agree.
all at the
Mhm.
same time,
Completely agree.
you know?
Yeah.
So that feels like that should also be at least not as maybe as urgent, but also part of our a strategic long-term plan with this, because those neighbors also have expressed at their neighborhood meeting when I've been there concerns about the use of that and the care of that site right there in their neighborhood,
Mhm.
so.
We have quite a few people there, and that space is used like
It is
daily,
used.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of our professional development and, both all spaces are used there quite extensively, so.
Can I bring up a sore subject?
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for this necessarily. I just wanna be clear on reasoning. I know that if we even suggest putting a district office there, it's a need, we need it, and if we suggest it, I think everyone will get extremely upset. So I just wanna make sure I understand the reasoning behind it. But is it just simply because they want students, they don't want adults? I mean, it seemed like through the community meetings they were saying they want students. Does anybody know, like,
At Dixon, or?
Yeah, at Dixon.
Why don't they want the district office at the Dixon site?
And I know there's a long history here. It felt like way back in the 2018 bond, they were fighting the idea of putting a district office there because they wanted the junior high, right? And I understand that, but the junior high has moved, so now why not a district office? Why is that the very least last choice?
There's
Go ahead.
there's
Is it just leftover like
not enough
trauma
space.
from?
Honestly, you need parking.
Yeah.
For a district office, you need parking because there's employees.
Yeah.
At Grandview Hill, there's 20 acres.
Yeah. Okay.
There's plenty of space up there.
15.
Which
There
is
is
still more than
space.
Dixon.
Yeah, there is more space.
Dixon's only 7 acres, what, or 8?
Yeah, 7.5-ish or 8, close,
I
yeah.
mean, there's space for parking, a bus thing and enough for teachers, but the amount of people that come in and out of the district office.
We would still need parking though, even for the new CTE center and I mean.
We gotta figure out whatever it is.
Do you have a good understanding of that? Cause I'm not saying, I wanna be very clear, I'm not necessarily advocating for or saying that this is the best option, but if we started to study all this and the best, most cost-effective option was putting a district office there, why not?
I think there's a lot of reasons. It's very multifaceted, multi-layered. One of the, and I'll just throw out a few. One is people bought their homes there because their children could walk to school. Now I know that the school has moved, but if there was a CTE program, their kids could still access it, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is what you mentioned. It's like, it makes it more alive, right? When you see children out there and things like that. And I think with those two things, this part of the city, which I live in and grew up in, feels very like, if this was in a different part of town, this would not have happened because there's enough people who have enough clout that if they didn't want the school moved, it wouldn't have been moved, and I agree. I have to say that I can 100% agree with them. Another thing is, they feel it's underutilizing the building, right? You could be, it's right, it's in the center of town. A district office can really go anywhere, but in the center of town, it's more accessible, more students can get there. Transportation for parents is not as big of an issue because they can take the bus, they can ride their bikes, right? You stick, that's part of the problem with, honestly, with the Shoreline one is, and we're seeing it now, the busing is gonna be not out of control, there's a lot of busing. Because we've stuck it out in the boondocks. And this is a good location to have some centralized programs. So I believe that they feel that's an underutilization of space. I could give you a lot more reasons, but I think those are the ones that I hear most.
And can I
meet that need?
I do believe, because a lot of the kids in this, who live in that area have parents who work in airfields similar, and so I think there would be a lot of interest, and they could, the problem, it's not a problem, is if they have to get back and forth between school and there, right, they still can't just walk to school, right? And there is a some number of people who do want, they do believe that it's gonna, we're gonna have a need for a third middle school, so they don't wanna put something in there that's going to take that
Option away.
option off, yeah, off the table.
Okay. And so then I wanna follow up too, because I know this is, what I've heard about this option is, and this is what I'm also gonna talk about, again, I'm not necessarily advocating for it, just need to bring it up, is taking Timpanogos Elementary School and putting it on the Dixon site, which in my mind makes a lot of sense because it's on such a busy street and the site is too small, this gives a couple more
Playground's too
acres,
small.
right, and so.
The Dixon site's too big for an elementary school.
We
I
just
thought
built Wasatch
elementary
on 12 acres.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the state recommendation actually for an elementary school is 10 acres.
Yeah.
And I know people argue with those recommendations.
State recommendations aren't
but
great.
but 7 acres doesn't, or 8 acres doesn't
In the
feel
middle of
too
the
big
neighborhood.
to
I
me
mean,
in the
how
middle of
big
the
is,
neighborhood.
how big is the acreage for Timpanogos right now?
I'm not
It's
necessarily
5.5.
talking acreage, I'm talking about the actual building, right? It goes straight up, and part of the reason people fought against Shoreline being there was because why are we having people be straight up and down, right? So we're doing the same thing.
But I
When
thought
kids
that's what
can't get
would've
out of the
happened.
building if there's a fire, okay, well, middle school kids are gonna be able to get out of there quicker than elementary school kids.
You mean on the Dixon side it would have to go straight up, is that what you're saying?
If you're gonna preserve the green space that everybody,
Yeah.
that you need, yes, you're gonna have to build up instead of out.
But
Isn't
an elementary
Timpanogos
is not
currently
as
3?
big as a middle school.
That's true.
And Timpanogos is currently 3 levels already, right?
Right.
So it's not like it would be taller
No,
than.
I'm just bringing up all the this is
Yeah,
all gonna come
right,
up,
okay.
all the arguments
Well,
that
right.
you, that
So-
everybody here
yeah.
fought against are gonna come up again.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
to
I
answer
mean,
those.
I think
I'm not
I
trying to
have some of
argue
the
with
same questions because I feel like it could be so valuable to get our young students off of that busy road and the
It's
hard
not an
access
issue.
and
I've been
everything.
crossing guard over there. It's not an issue.
But
Okay.
I guess I don't understand why the community's saying we want students there and to have
Timpanogos students there doesn't
700,
count,
800
yeah.
of our youngest elementary students in that neighborhood, I think that, I'm not saying this is my favorite option,
They
but I
want
don't
both
understand
sites
why.
with students. They want both
That's-
sites
okay.
with students.
Cause I feel
Sure,
like
and
the
then we
only
could put
argument
the
I ever hear.
CTE on the more major road with our older students,
Yeah.
right? Like if we were to do that,
I'm
right?
saying, I feel like the only argument I hear, or the most recited argument is, well, that's what the district office was gonna do in the first place, and like, they don't like that, but that's actually it was never a thing, it was a suggestion.
It was.
But who? Cause it wasn't ever a thing when I.
This is for an executive session. This is not for
Okay.
this.
Okay.
It was a thing. It was a thing.
It was a suggestion I heard, but
It was a
wasn't.
thing. Well, it was a thing. We can get into it right now. You wanna get into it?
I just, well.
We can get into it, but I will tell you, it was a thing, and maybe it wasn't an official thing that was on paper, but it was definitely the plan. This was the plan of some people here at the district office, and instead of being upfront and saying, this is what we're gonna do, they kept doing this, right? And so, if we need to do all of these things, put the district office in Timpanogos and move the elementary school, then let's do it, right?
Yeah.
But we just screwed that neighborhood again.
I don't understand how putting their
You
students
haven't
right
lived here,
next
you
to them.
haven't lived there.
and
You
that's
haven't
why I'm trying to
lived there.
understand.
We
because
tried to
it's
explain it to you. I've been trying to
multiple
explain this
times.
to you guys for 4 freaking years.
Yes.
And you don't get it. I don't know what else to do.
I just wanna say, so what I think you're actually asking is what if we had CTE in one and an elementary in the other?
So
and
that's not what was
swap
brought
them?
up. What she brought up
Right, but
was
that's what
district
she just
office.
asked
So
about.
which one are we talking about?
If we just swapped and put
If you
CTE
had
type of
CTE
thing
in
where
one and
Timpanogos is now
elementary
and we
in the
had
other,
our younger
how would
students
people
in the
feel
heart of the
about that?
neighborhood.
I don't know, but I think it would
With
be
more
much more
green
palatable
space.
than putting a district office
Right.
there. I myself,
Uh-huh.
district office, whatever, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
we're gonna do this again, and to be honest, I don't know that we care.
Correct, and here's
I
the
don't know that
question
we care.
is, if
I
it
really am
allows,
not trying to
the
push
question
for
is
it
just
or push
students,
buttons.
like, it would it, if we're talking about then just what makes the most sense to fit our population of students for CTE and students for elementary school, and we have 2 sites, will people, do you feel like, and this is obviously a question for the greater community and not just here, but what's
We're
your
not making a
feeling
decision.
about whether it's really essential to keep Timpanogos and put CTE here versus potentially putting a CTE or tech center and an elementary school there?
So this is just that has never been presented to me,
Okay.
but my feeling would be, taking it back to my community, I think that would be acceptable.
The only thing that I would need to know to do that, how much would it cost to retrofit
Yeah, it might cost
Yeah,
Timpanogos?
it's probably,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a more expensive
I think
option,
it would
and
be.
again,
But
I
this
want
is
to be
like-
very clear, I'm not necessarily
Yeah.
advocating, but we're also waiting for a boundary study to come back, and we're talking about thinking into the future, right? And trying to give our kids the best situation, not only right now, but in the future, right? And if that were to come back as something that was suggested as one of our better options, I'm not trying to tick people off, I'm not trying to dig up dirt, I am wanting to do what's best for the kids or whatever, right? And I just, it wasn't a thing for me, so
Yeah.
I don't know who, and whatever was happening was not with me involved, so I guess, I don't know, I'm just trying to,
Well, and
I just wanna know if there's, it feels like the reasoning that the district office was doing something behind our back, I'm saying, okay, I'm not saying that wasn't true, but if that's the reasoning, like, are they really not open to, what if this is the best thing? Just because they felt slighted by the district office in the past, does that make sense?
But you're gonna come back to what's the best thing. Your
Mm-hmm.
definition of best and their definition of best is not gonna be the same, I can tell you that right
Okay.
now.
So I get that.
I do think
I get
that
that.
this idea we're talking about right now definitely would cost more money than just, okay, what are we gonna do for Dixon site,
Yeah.
right? The only reason I thought we should at least get it out on the table is because I do see value in getting Timpanogos a building that better suits their needs, cause it's too small of a building right now and the property, and I see value in them being in the heart of the neighborhood instead of off to the side, but I would only do that if the community agrees with that, right? If they don't want to move their kids over there, then why would we go to the extra
Right.
expense and time? But if they
And
feel,
again, we're
if they
doing a
feel
boundary study that
Yeah,
can solve
sure,
those problems.
it could. But if they feel that's a valuable thing, I think we need to have that on the table, in addition to these other things that we have on the table, and get feedback on it, right? And I don't know who is pushing it, because I only heard a board member or two, but I hope
There was a lot of underneath
but what I
the table
hope
crap.
that people understand now is a lot of people are different. The
Yeah.
board is
A lot of people are still the same.
A lot of the board is different, a lot of the district people are different, and I'm trying to come at this as what is best now. And I think we all want to work with the community, and we're trying to show that we do, so.
Lisa.
I just wanna add DLI now to this conversation.
Woo-hoo.
Because I think, let's throw it all out there, so as we talk about and think about things like enrollment at Timpanogos or some of our other schools, and we're talking about boundaries, and needs down the road, a piece of that conversation will need to be our DLI program. And, because we can draw boundaries, but again, if people want a DLI program, even if you redraw a line and say, we're gonna remove the enrollment pressure on this school because now you're in the boundary of this school, but they want that DLI program, I think they will still opt in if possible, and I would want to give them, especially with the DLI program at Timpanogos, that option. So I think, it is an important piece of this puzzle to be thinking about and talking about our DLI program. I was happy to see the data that you sent out, Wendy. I think that would be interesting for even the public to maybe see and put on board docs and start looking at and thinking about, how many of our students that are enrolled in neighborhood schools are participating in that DLI program, and I think it's also useful to see how many of them live within those boundaries. Now, they may have moved there intentionally to be in the boundary of that DLI program, but also how many choice in outside of their own boundary to that DLI program. Like, I feel like that's a piece of our conversation to have, because it is also, as we're looking down the road at our boundaries and feasibility studies, a program to think about. And, you know, does it hurt or help to consider consolidating some of our DLI programs into one location? Like, in that, I know it's an extra cost, I know it stirs a lot of things up. So I'm not saying I think that's a right decision, but I feel like we need to look at that as a piece of how we're using our buildings and how we want to keep using them over the next 10 to 20 years. You know, do we house our DLI programs in individual neighborhood schools and try to scatter them fairly throughout the city? Because it, you know, some people can't drive their own child somewhere to be part of the Mandarin program, and some people can, right? And so, like, if we had a central location and we bused I'm just, anyway, I think that needs to also be in this conversation. Not necessarily saying Dixon should be a DLI campus, but it does feel like another alternative to look at, like special programs in one place. And I know that might super rock the boat for enrollment at all of our schools, but
The only thing I see with that, we're already underutilizing all of our elementary schools. That if we were to take, we would be way underutilizing our schools again, because we're taking out even just 2 programs from
but we pay
school.
so much for FTE to run these programs and balance them with our English cohorts, and there is always the issue of our, you know, do we have 2 classes for every first grade in Spanish immersion, but only 1 class for English immersion? Like, there's a lot of issues that are impacted by the way we're doing it now, and maybe they're worth it to us. I think this is part of why Provost spends as much as we do per student, but pays as much as we do for FTE. I think we have a lot of money that goes into supporting this, and if this is the decision we make because this priority is important enough, fine, but I think we need to look at, is there a way to still offer what we offer and in a more long-term cost-effective way, or would that actually not, if it doesn't move the needle, then I for sure wouldn't want to rock the boat. So I recognize how much that would rock the boat. Go ahead.
I think it's a great question, and I am excited for feasibility studies. I would love to get some clarity on that and decide as part of that. We talked about this previously, that if we were to decide to do more of a campus idea for DLI, that because of those adjustments, then maybe we don't need full elementary school somewhere, so we could use one of our current elementary schools to be that campus and
Or
still be
district
okay
office
on our
or
elementary,
whatever.
and then we can still use the Dixon site to meet all these other needs that we're already talking
It
about,
feels like
right?
we've already established that elementary school level is really not where we have our biggest need, right?
Right.
So I think secondary makes more sense in general.
But I do
I'm not
think we
saying
need
that
to
DLI
have
doesn't need to
conversation
be
at
looked
some
at,
point
but I think
on
the
that.
big key to that again is gonna be the boundary study, right? And looking at, especially if we include that in the boundary study.
We are including DLI as part of the feasibility, right?
I think the one thing, if we do a centralized campus or say 2 magnet campuses for DLI or something, you're gonna have to convert a neighborhood school into that magnet site, so then you'll be busing neighborhood kids into a different school as a result of that. And so, you know, it's just, is that cost greater than the cost that we're using for the FTE? Does that create a better solution because all of the students are now in a single campus involved in a DLI program, so you don't have the segregation of the students? Those are all questions we have to grapple with, right, in that sense.
And I'm not advocating that.
No,
I think
no, no,
that's
it's just,
the
it's a
solution.
great,
I just wanna
it's a
have
great
that
question.
conversation, because there are equity issues around our English students and our immersion students at those neighborhood schools.
Yeah. Well, and there will become an equity issue as you reduce those sites, and then they can't access it
Right.
if we choose not to provide transportation, right? What does that look like? Yeah, so.
Which happened with Cass when they split Cass. They lost the bus, right? And for said that was, you know, lucky those of us who had like a group of parents in our neighborhood and we could make a really easy carpool, but that wasn't the case for everyone.
Okay. Anything else? I think it would be nice to look at some of these options we've talked about and maybe just talk about square footage and programming and kind of what we are looking at as far as a building goes. Can we do that? Do we have any idea what kinds of square footage we need for a cap center?
Said 10,000 I thought was
I saw that somewhere, 10,000.
10,000, okay.
And how much is Dixon currently? How many square feet?
Dixon is 124,000 square feet.
It's a little over.
And when we say 10,000,
I-
that's just for the caps part, not any
I
other.
thought the 10,000 was
That's
the
correct.
extra he needed for the other two strands. Maybe I read that
Oh,
wrong.
maybe you read that right, you might be correct. I thought it was 10,000 for, to do the extra strands and to have the maker
Okay,
space
that
and
makes
everything.
sense, that makes sense, cause I'm like,
Say,
10,000
Cass
is a
needs
lot.
110,000
I think, yeah, no, I think it's, I think it's
He was
10,000, I think
lovely.
it's 10,000 total.
10,000 total, cause I
Okay.
just wanna get, if right now, we know that Dixon is 124,000 square feet, we can understand that size, right? And if we start to add up the square footage of what we're looking at for each one of these, we can see if this is even, like, if we had every last one of these things.
Right.
Is it even an option, right? So do we have any idea how much we want for adult ed?
It would, I think they use 2 portables right now, so about 2,500 square feet would be
But
more
I'm
than
maybe
enough
3,000 square
administrative
feet.
space, right?
They don't have administrative space, right? They just
That's what
have
I'm
all
saying, it's just in
all
2, it's just in 2
Yeah.
portables
Do
right
we
now.
also
But I
count
also
what
know that they
were
can-
you doing at the Dixon site as part of that when we're
No,
talking about
no,
it together though?
no, I'm just talking about the portables at Independence High for adult ed.
And
They're
unless
small
they-
portables.
Yeah, it's about 2,500 square feet for just that piece.
Is the can you just clarify, the part that's at Dixon, is that run as a part of adult ed though?
It's run as a part of community ed.
Community ed, and is that within the adult ed, its own department?
It's its own entity.
Okay.
And our district runs it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I do know I've been talking with adult ed before, they would like more space. They can do more if they
Oh, for
have
sure,
more.
oh, for sure.
So is 2,500 the right number
Just
for them?
put 5,000.
Okay.
Let's go big.
Are we dreaming big?
Let's dream big.
So
Okay.
then community ed would need space for
Yeah,
that.
community ed would need to, do we have any idea how much is being used for community ed?
It's not a lot of space. I would say 2,500 would allow them to actually expand that quite a
Okay.
bit.
And are they the ones that like use some of the Dixon classrooms at night that aren't technically part of their space, so
Yes.
really they're using more?
No, they're not using that much more than that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, if we had some kind of daycare with some kind of education strand, what do we need there?
I need to think about how many square feet my daycare was. About that for a minute.
Rebecca, what's the good size of the daycare? And the preschool.
Well, I don't have a daycare, just to be
Oh,
clear,
just
but I do
okay,
have a
the
preschool.
preschool.
I mean, I only have like, I don't wanna say I have like 800 square feet. I have a pretty good size.
Utah child licensing is 35 square feet per kid.
Okay.
Back up, cause I know when
Say
I was
how
looking
many-
at.
how many
Well,
kids
you
are we
have
gonna
to
take,
decide
right?
and advance and make sure you bought the physical space for that.
Yeah.
And as we're having this discussion, like, I think square feet is a good thing, and that could be, if it is decided that we would put the CTE at Timpanogos, this can all still fit within that same discussion, correct? Like, if they need 15,000 square feet, we can also transfer that over to the other site,
To
right?
whatever
For
site
sure.
we could
I
do.
think we just need to look at like total square.
Yeah.
So Timpanogos currently is 69,000 square feet. So when you're looking at total square feet, if all of this is less than 69, it would be a pretty.
And that's just the building, not including playground.
Correct.
That's
This
right.
is just square footage of the buildings.
I would
And
put
And with the daycare, we would probably also need a playground.
Yes, you would,
Mhm.
absolutely. I would put 5,000 square feet for your daycare, just because it would allow you to have maybe 2 different classrooms and additionally a preschool, which would be
Yeah, I was
awesome.
gonna say, do we know how much square footage is at
What's Sunrise?
at Sunrise?
Yeah. Well, Provo Peaks with Sunrise is at 80,000. Trying to remember if I
remember how
place
many-
separate.
Jared, do you remember, Jared or Jason, do you remember how many classrooms there are at Sunrise?
Like
Preschool right now?
4 or 5,
I
yeah.
think there's 4
Is there
classrooms.
4?
4.
there's at least four.
Does Michelle know?
Yeah.
And the front office.
Yeah.
There's
And
also
then
some
their
other common
playground is
spaces.
separate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that would need to be fixed,
Yes.
because we don't wanna have a separate playground. We wanna have the playground next to the building.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, how about East Bay Post Iowa, we said 12,000 square feet,
12,000
right?
square feet, yeah.
And then let's talk about all the CTE programs. Like I have listed aviation, but that would be a CTE program, right?
Mhm.
And we're talking, these are like the CTE programs we would want. Quick clarification, we have space in our high schools for wood shop and for
Yeah.
auto, so
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
leaving those, right? Where
Yeah.
this is
We're not.
additional.
These are additional.
Okay.
This is
So
not
any
taking
other
anything
programs
away.
we felt like we wanted to add in because we just can't get to Spanish Fork or to Lehigh or Payson.
But we're taking away students from the high schools
Mhm.
to add this, and that's my question, is like, is there programs that we would be deleting?
There could be.
Could be.
The
Is
other,
that
the other.
up to
eSwitch.
Right, and I guess that's.
The other thing I would wanna look at is how many of our students are not on a full schedule. 'Cause there are students that don't take a full schedule of classes, so they're on partial schedules because they technically only need 24 credits, or if they don't take seminary, they don't use
Right.
all of it, so they
Yeah.
go, so you'll get a certain percentage of your students. And I would guess it's different for Timpview than it is for Provo, but at any given time, my seniors, I only had about 70% of my students that were on a full schedule because they already had their credits.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So,
For sure.
I did that my senior year. My
Yeah.
first period was an internship.
Yeah.
So the
And then I
question,
went
so
to
the
school.
question is,
I
does
think it's
this
mostly
draw
seniors.
some of those kids back into a full schedule as a result, because we're actually providing something on campus that they could take the opportunity?
We wanna help them utilize
Yeah,
the
so we
schools
wanna
and they
use,
go out
yes,
free.
I don't want them to not be having a full schedule, right?
$5
So,
a CE credit.
yeah.
Wendy, will you remind me, earlier in the conversation today, you said that Clay mentioned that he felt he could get grants or something, and I think I missed what that was. What was that?
Yeah, so there's grants that come through workforce services, that's where he felt like he could get money for daycare. There are STEM grants that can come through for CTE, and Perkins will increase, the amount of money that we get is based on our enrollment, and our enrollment is smaller than it should be for the size of district that we have. So his belief is that by expanding the opportunities, then it's gonna expand that grant money, so that will help to offset the cost.
And Perkins really loves new things.
Yes,
So
they do love
they
really new
grant
things.
more money to districts
Or trying
for
new things.
equipment and items for a new program that is a
So
CTE related
just
program.
looking at this list here on this document about the CTE plan, some of the things listed are medical assisting, construction, law enforcement, firefighter, cosmetology, aviation, and you mentioned diesel mechanics.
Yeah, it feels like those courses take up the most.
So
Yeah,
that's
take up the most square
wondering about
footage, right?
space,
Yeah.
square footage
Yeah.
for something like that. But that's within his, is that within that number of 10,000
Oh,
square
no,
feet
no,
potentially?
the additional
That would be
CTE, the additional CTE programs are
Different
additional.
yeah, different than caps, right? So
Mhm.
anyone have a good, wanna throw out a good ballpark
I'm
figure?
gonna go in and look at
I just wanna.
I wonder, I mean, some of these seem kind of specialized, but do they do A day is, 3 of these and B day is other 3 and they can share the
Utilize
same
the same
class
use
spaces,
the
right? I
same
think we're gonna need to play it way in on some of that.
I think so too, but I think about the difference between like the wood shop and the welding shop. Like you don't.
Sure.
Right, there's some
Sure.
spaces you can't.
But they could share
Or
a
maybe have a
classroom, but
classroom
not a
and a
lab.
lab.
They're not allowed, yeah,
Yeah.
no, that makes sense, Yeah.
So when I look at the CTE building that is in Davis District, I believe that total amount is 40,000 square feet for everything that it has, which is
And then I rent
a
out
lot, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna
I
say
mean,
how many
that
programs do they
that
have?
has a ton of programs in it, and so I think if you,
Districts in there.
yeah, so I mean, if you're overestimating.
And Jordan has it split here, it says 3
Yeah.
campuses, right?
Yeah.
The North Campus has aviation
Two,
science,
yeah.
biotech and medical forensics, code boot camp, and dental assistant, digital media engineering. Anyway, a lot of things through veterinary science, web development, pharmacy tech,
and that's just at the north. Their south campus has a similarly long list of options. I guess those two spaces combined are a lot. But we want whatever, if we're gonna do something like this, I would say you would wanna have enough space there to eventually do all the things you think you could use to really get our students career and life ready, right? And so
That was something I hadn't factored in until Wendy said their district is so much bigger than ours. So maybe we could, we wouldn't need, yeah, we wouldn't have as many students coming in, so we could house more programs at one site, I don't know.
Or
But I
do
hadn't thought
some
about that.
programs just require a certain amount of space,
some
regardless
programs
of
will
how many
require a
students?
certain amount of space, like diesel is, it doesn't matter. And you're only gonna be able to have X number of students in there. So the reason they have 3 different sites is because they have that many students, right? Or they house different programs at different sites, and then they'll have different teachers and rotate through and that type of thing.
Did you say does Ogden have one of these in their single
I
city?
believe so.
Okay, so I'm adding up 72,500, so I just rounded to 75,000. Did I do my math right, Melanie?
I didn't even write it down,
I wrote it up.
sure,
So I
sounds
got
good.
10,000 for CAPS, 5,000 for adult ed, 12,000 for East Bay Post High, 40,000 for extra CTE programs, 5,000 for a daycare and education program, and 2,500 for community ed.
And I would go ahead and just make that 5,000, cause what Jared just
For
told me,
which
they
one?
were using,
Community
they were
ed?
using 8 classrooms sometimes at night, so I think if you just put in 5,000.
Okay, so then we've got 15, 20, 60, 65, 77. So like if we round it up to like 80,000-ish square feet, does that sound?
And that's if you're
Plus playground.
So we know right now if Dixon is currently 124,000 and we're
will
looking
have-
at
we'll have
80,
plenty of
we have
room
plenty
for
of
that.
room for building and green space, right? Playground for the.
And it all just depends how we wanna do
Right.
it, right? We can still
I mean, Dixon
story,
is
but
only
we don't
2
have
stories
to.
right now,
But we
right?
do need to make more room for parking.
For the, for 80,000.
So 80,000 square feet is, that's what I was gonna say, it's about 34 million.
And
way
that's
better
without
than I thought.
furniture and.
Yeah, that's not gonna be
That's
any of
without-
the
You'll
equipment.
probably want, you'd round it up, because then that, you have to also include architect costs, so
And
this
tearing
would probably
down
be about
40.
42 million is what we would bond for.
And did you say 80,000 square feet?
80,000.
So that then takes out Timpanogos site, cause that's only 69,000 square feet, is that right?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it's 10,000 different, and these are estimates, so we will just have to.
Yeah.
Plus
If we wanna really consider that option, we just have to
Does the 69,000 include, like, don't they have portables that, or do they
They
have?
do not, the
Right.
portables are gone, or they
Portables are
will
gone.
be gone this year, so
Okay.
it does not include the portables, so it's just the building.
So I mean, it feels like we can fit all of these things we've listed, right? And if we can fit them all, I say that's what we go for. I mean, if, I know there's so many other things still pending, but I say that becomes kind of our goal is a building that can fit all these things we've talked about.
I think we need to pull some see if we
We
can
need
pull
more
our
specifics.
counselors and Clay to pull some specific data to make sure we have the student, like how many students is this gonna serve? If you put in a diesel program, how many students are you gonna put in there? 'Cause
That's gonna be expensive to put that in.
Right, so
And
if
it's
you're
a
only
lot
gonna,
of
if
square
you're only gonna
footage.
serve 20 students across the district and it costs
Right.
$10 million to put in, how many years is it gonna take you to recoup that cost versus heck, I just arrange a school bus to drive to, you know,
Spanish
what is
Fork,
it, to, you know, to wherever it is, right? So
Yeah.
we do need to make that comparable, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just
So.
saying, I mean, if we can, if we start looking at numbers and all that kind of stuff and it all comes back that we could do it, I say we try to go for it all.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Is it, I don't know
Be
about these
reasonable.
CTE programs at MTech, well, like if they're half of a day or evening classes.
Most of them are evening, some of them are during the day. One of the advantages to MTech is that they can change and add things very quickly compared to what we can do as, like, they don't have to go through as many hoops, I guess is the word I would say. Because like, being able to put the data and analytics program together, they were able to do that within like 6 months. Because they saw a need, figured out, and if they see things ebb and flow, they can change things.
Well, when you look at that, Domo's actually offered to create a curriculum, or they have a curriculum that a CTE director that works for them has created that they've actually, that they're using at UVU and a couple of the other colleges that they've offered to put in place in our district, so.
I guess that I am curious though, just to know, like if we ran a district bus from each of our 2 current high schools to Spanish Fork and they had campuses at a certain time of day and back, like how much does that cost over 10 years versus the cost, you know what I'm saying, like I do
Well,
wanna
if you have
kinda know.
enough kids to fit a bus, then.
But you won't, probably. So you're gonna be running it depends,
Right.
it depends on when those classes are taught and,
Sure.
you know.
I mean, and I guess the question just is, if we don't have a lot of kids, and how many millions of dollars do we spend on the center for a few kids? That's what I wanna make sure.
I
we
don't
know.
disagree, but at the same time, we're behind. Right? I wonder if we don't have any kids because we don't
Yeah,
offer it. Like
right.
if
No, I
Jordan
get
has
you.
3 schools or 3 centers or whatever, they're clearly filling them, so maybe we create
bringing
the
people back
opportunity and
in.
then
I mean,
make
are
the
they
kids fill
filling
it.
them?
If you
They're
build it,
building
they
it,
will.
so come. Jinx.
Yeah.
Okay.
They wouldn't have added a 3rd site if that were not the case, and I will just say, speaking from my own experience in Canyons, when we split as a district and we only got the C-Tech part, that only incorporated certain programs, and then our students had to go into Jordan District to the JATC, and as soon as that split happened, Jordan District said priority goes to our students, so only if there's a spot reserved and or only if there's a spot available, and then eventually we stopped busing. And so, but as soon as they started talking about building another tech center with all that, now you're getting students that are like, we're ready to go, because what was happening is they're losing students to Jordan District as a result of that. So a student who wants to do those programs, they just permit into Bingham or one of the other schools and then take advantage of JATC. So I don't know how many kids that, I don't think we've tracked that, you know, very well. I think one of the things that's gonna be helpful is with one of the Power School modules that we have purchased, which is Naviance, allows us to track those career pathways of students, so we'll be able to see how much are students requesting things, what does that look like, and we can see how many are coming in, you know, 7th grade, and we're coaching them through things, and are we getting them into the classes that are helping them with those career goals, and what does that look like. So we'll have a much better system, we haven't tracked that, I'm gonna be honest.
I see a lot of value in the CTE, and it's just a comment, I don't feel we're advertising it well enough now of the benefits for the students. What we have, there are strands they can do, and there's a paper they can look at, but the way, at least for my experience as a parent, the way it's being explained to the students and the parents, it's just kinda like, here's a list of our classes.
You're
And you
not
get to
wrong.
graduation, you're like, so and so did a pathway, what does that even mean, right? Like,
No, I agree.
and so I think number one, generally we could be better, but if we're gonna invest money into a magnet, I mean, maybe that would automatically make it more visible and get more people in, but I do think we need to be, if we're gonna do that, we need to also improve our system on how we talk to our students and their families about what it can do for them and the value of these programs, and not just taking one class, but doing a whole pathway, right? And the benefits of not taking only a half schedule your senior year, like, right? Like, we can help you on all of these post-secondary goals, just need to do a better job.
Would this also help, I noticed a lot of independent students, or I guess when I was working there, would leave to go to do different classes. Would something like this be beneficial for, like, do we think that a lot of independent students would be able to take advantage of these?
Are you talking about like homeschooled students or?
No, the ones who go to
Independent high school.
independents.
Yes, that was, I mean, I think that's,
Yes.
but that also requires us to rethink what their schedule looks like, because one of the barriers to them participating in MTech is because of the 7-period day. And it is something that independence feels like works really well for them, so we'd have to just figure out how do we make that work so that we're not undermining the success that they've had, right? And because
don't they do trimesters as well?
Yes,
So
they do
that's
trimesters, and
completely
so
different
we
schedule.
would have to really look at what how can we be creative in making this accessible. You know, maybe it's something where we're putting kids on a I don't know, I can think about that.
Maybe they do the first 5 periods at
Mhm.
Independence and then their last two of the
Two,
day is
yeah.
one at the center or
Yeah,
something.
something like that. And it looks like, so I'm just looking on, I'm on the Ogden site, that OTech High School is, they say it's on a brand new building on the campus of Ogden Weaver Technical College.
Yeah, it is.
So is that a, how does a
Partnership?
public school
That like with
build a school on a
Probably some
Oh,
kind of
it's
partnership they work out.
it's the same thing as
Is it
like,
in-
for example, New Ames is a charter school that's inside Weber State University.
So
It's also
UCAS,
the-
UCAS,
Mhm.
it's right on UU's campus.
Right, so it's the same type of situation, but UCAS isn't a public, yeah, it is
It is
a
a
charter
charter
school.
school,
Charter
which is
school.
a
But it's still a
charter
public,
school.
but it's still
It's a
okay.
public school.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I would love to know how many students they have enrolled here and, you know.
So it sounds like we just need to start really digging into numbers and things now, right, Jennifer?
I'd like some clarification when we're talking about daycare.
For teachers.
I know, well, that idea kinda got floated and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're doing it, and I would like to just make sure I understand what we're talking about. It would be something where we're not providing a free service, but it's the convenience, and would it be a lower cost than most other daycares?
And it would
Okay.
be specifically reserved for teachers, correct?
For teachers and employees, but mostly for teachers, those are the individuals that you're trying to recruit, right?
Okay.
The
And then we
classes Meg and I attended at NSBA last year, they gradually worked their way. So they started with 3-year-olds and then
Mhm.
2-year-olds and then
Yeah,
1-year-olds.
you don't generally wanna start with newborns right out of the
No.
gate, but the daycare that I had at Jordan High would take them at 6 weeks. So
Yeah.
they would go on their maternity leave and as soon as they came back, their kid was in our daycare on
Yeah.
site.
I went to a couple NSBA classes this year and I would love to help gather information or do whatever we could to find out the need in this district and see if there were a way to have that. I think it would really support our teachers a lot and help us
That's a big
recruit
piece for
and
teacher
retain
retention.
teachers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know one teacher right now is leaving Franklin because
There
due
was
on
one
the first day of school in August.
Mhm. There was one at Westridge too that was awesome and she left cause daycare is too expensive.
Yep.
So
Thank
I love
you.
that idea, yeah.
Again, I think we just need to get numbers and costs for everything right now.
Yeah. Can we start digging in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna create a sheet that just starts to list some of the questions that I've heard, and I'll just share it with you, and please just add your questions, and I'll start assigning it out to members of our team to start investigating what that looks like and then attaching the data.
Something that we haven't talked about, like there's a couple of other sites that we own that, like there's the little building that's right south of Centennial.
Mhm.
Hillside, like.
We do have a piece of property in
And we have piece of property, but I'm
northwest.
just wondering, like.
We do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's like 12 acres for another elementary.
For a
but we
potential
don't need
elementary school.
that.
Just north of Purple High.
But I'm just wondering, is there anything that we can consolidate from those buildings to be part of this new build and sell these other properties so that things can be more consolidated? Or is that part of the question, like if we decide to build something like Grandview as a district office, that we
I feel
would
like Hillside's just
consolidate those
offices,
things?
right? Okay.
I just don't like, even, Chad's group is clear off in Sunset View, or I don't know if we would move any of that, but I don't know if we want to have like a more consolidated area. I don't know, just something to think about.
I
And
think
we
if
could use the costs of selling those places to offset.
I feel like we can't sell the place at Sunset View though. That's like weird. That's
No.
situated, right? That part. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that technology has to stay there. I think that's something we can't really.
But like Hillside, maybe.
Hillside we could possibly, or the piece of property if we don't feel like we're gonna need more elementaries or, so we can look into those too for sure.
I think that's how you look at funding potentially a district office, right? And your feasibility study will let you know, we don't need this property for an elementary school, like we don't anticipate that there would be growth here. Or it'll come back and say, don't sell that property because we actually think there might be, whatever that might look like. So, but I think you could use those other pieces of property to sell and then
build your district office on the
Just
ground
clarify,
use site.
Hillside's gonna bring it.
Right, but
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's true.
but what I'm
Won't
saying
pay
though,
for it,
it
but-
won't pay
Yeah.
for it, but what I'm saying is like if we can consolidate things, people's travels time,
Oh,
get
for sure.
down,
Yeah,
there's
essentially
just,
not
it's
bad
just
to
convenient
consolidate.
I
and
think
stuff
that
and
has
all
to
that.
be,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
we're doing a
Efficient.
district
I
office.
agree.
But I think we
But-
do need to, in the context of as we decide Dixon and programs, I think we do need to plan district office, and I'm glad it was brought up earlier because our students are our top priority, but we also need to take care of our other resources, which include not only the physical district office, but the people who work in it, and like you said, all the travel time and efficiencies and safety, there's no fire suppressants here, right?
It's not safe.
No,
Not at all.
I feel very safe here.
Let's clarify that that was a sarcastic
It was a
remark.
sarcastic remark.
For those watching.
Floors are
At least the
solid.
hospital's across the street.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
we didn't.
terrible.
I have taken advantage of that.
Yes, you have.
Actually, they've been full employees, so that's funny. Okay. So then you'll get a sheet going that helps
Mhm.
address any questions or anything we have. And what do you need from us? Do you need us to direct you exactly on what we want numbers on? Or do you feel
I
like
think
you have
just,
a good
I have a
idea?
good idea, I just think having those specific questions laid out as to what that looks like so that we can really start to make those very public as to kind of these are the needs. Then we can get with Clay and really sit down and talk through some things. I think it would be good to have him come back to a board meeting or a special study session at some point where he could answer more questions. Just
And if he could get numbers, like how many students
Yep.
we would need to
Yep.
make it feasibly
That's good.
run,
Make it beneficial,
and
yeah.
and even numbers for caps, like
Yeah.
tell us like
Past
you know,
enrollment.
past
for
enrollment,
caps.
like what we've been looking at.
And what's ideal.
And what's ideal, what, yeah, I think so that I just don't want to fund a diesel mechanic thing for $20 million.
No.
And it's gonna serve 6 kids.
Yep, I agree.
It,
No question.
there's just better ways we could spend our money.
How many students are in Jordan?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, if they have 3 centers, and how
I feel
many
like
like I
it's-
wonder if our
aren't they like
population
30,000
like
something?
scales
No, they're
down
like
massive-
70,000.
Oh, they're 70.
Right,
They're like
so-
third or
I
fourth
think
size.
They used to be close to 100,000 before they
Before
split.
they split.
So I just wonder
Alpine
if
is still bigger than
Alpine's
Jordan.
95,000.
okay,
That's-
like if
I don't know if this is
if you
current, it
scale
says
it down to our
59,000.
same size, does that make sense,
60,000.
right?
Oh, I might be.
60,000, okay. So
About-
they're 3 times our size, well,
Oh,
they're
4
more,
times.
they're 4 times our
4
size.
times, at least over 4 times.
But they have only 3 centers, right? So if
Mhm.
a quarter of the population, if it even more, it's
Which is why
a
I'm
center,
just
right?
asking the question. I understand the idea that if you build it, they will come. We have built an amazing CAPS program and not been able to completely fill it. And so that's why I just wanna
Again-
make sure though, maybe we're not offering all the right things.
Well, but I
and-
think it also goes down to the
Yeah.
communication like Jennifer's talking about, especially even we need to start doing it at the 7th and 8th grade
Yes,
level.
that's exactly right.
And because like my kids was like all of a sudden it was freshmen, here pick what classes you want for freshmen, and you had like 2 options for you know, to put in your as your elective. So it's very, but if you wanna be more decisive about, no, this is the pathway I wanna go as a freshman, 'cause my kids were like, I don't know,
yeah.
so.
Well, and I think that will help with John Anderson being over counselors and special programs, and he is gonna be working very closely with Clay to streamline. We've gotten all of the information, particularly on credit recovery and what are the conversations that are gonna happen with counselors and what does that look like. Because I agree, one of the things I hear from parents all the time is what this parent is told is very different information from what this parent is told. There isn't a consistent, you know, it's very counselor dependent, it's very student dependent. Is the student advocating for themselves? Is the parent advocating for that information? That's problematic, right? And so, I know, just
we held a community night for our incoming ninth and 10th graders about our C-Tech program, and we held it entirely in Spanish. There were no interpreters. And we had 70 students sign up for C-Tech that were multilingual students that had no idea that the program even existed, because it's sent home with them, but they're like, I don't know, look at this, and they're not necessarily understanding all of the different pieces of it. So a part of that is, what does our outreach to the parents look like, and can we communicate what does this mean in terms of a job for you and your
I think the other thing with CAPS too, it's a cultural shift, because a lot of kids may not, they're like, well, I wanna take an AP class, instead of, because you have to take one or the other a lot of the times. And so it's that communication of saying, these are the benefits you can get by taking CAPS over this AP class. Like, it's, but it's, again, it's just
To paint a
information.
picture.
Yeah.
Not just put a flyer out there, but paint
That's
a
right.
picture.
So.
The other thing I just wanna say that I'm just thinking about as we're talking about this is sometimes I already feel like people are overwhelmed by all the things we offer. We offer quite a few things already. And people get overwhelmed by it's like a kid in a candy store. You can't choose because there's just too many options. But if you give a kid 3 options, it's right? It becomes easy. All I'm saying is, do we really have the student population to even expand our offering further? Are we really gonna get the enrollment?
That's what
I mean, that's what you're saying, we're gonna be cherry picking from other programs, right? Or maybe if kids understand better.
You can only fit so much in your schedule, right?
Right, so I wonder.
But she's saying that there's kids out there that don't have full schedules, and maybe this will bring them back.
And if we had 50,000 kids in our school district, we would need that many offerings, but if we're just small enough that maybe, I don't know, I just wanna make sure the numbers work.
Can I ask
that
a
way
question
too.
to Jared?
Sure.
As a former Provo High principal, what did you see like your juniors and seniors, like what would you have seen to like entice them to want to come back to school?
I do think a diesel mechanic line course offering, whether we can figure out the right scale to invest in or not, would be a great demand. I also think hospitality is a huge draw that many people that aspire to maybe go elsewhere or wait until they've completed their high school experience. Those are my 2 initial thoughts to that question.
Do you have a thought on aviation?
Yeah, and I think there'll be a great demand for that. I do think that going through a CTE pathway could help some of the cost prohibitive nature of that industry. And I think it would really help kids develop. I think there's already a relationship with UVU that could be built. The proximity to all the high schools would make it very appealing.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know.
Well, and maybe to the question of, do we have enough students to warrant it? What we said earlier is maybe we bring in some of these high demand, high paying, but maybe pull back on some of the ones we're already doing, and so it replaces, but the value of having it in one central location, so you don't have to have 2, 3 teachers throughout the district teaching it, right? Yeah. And then that frees up classroom space or, it's a high regular school.
I would love it if our readiness coursework percentage was 100%. Like if every single graduate, like if we're really looking at a portrait of a graduate and we're thinking about higher levels of learning really should be about making sure students are ready for the next level of education, because for most of them they're not going to be able to survive just with a high school diploma. They're going to need some additional training, and if they're not prepared for that, the more they're prepared with that in high school, the more it just propels those opportunities beyond that. I mean, we've just seen it over and over and over again. And so in my mind, if we could start to say every single student will take an AP, a CE class, or complete a CTE pathway regardless of who you are, that would be huge. That would be an awesome goal, I think, for us to have, because then we're incorporating every single student. We're preparing for the next level. Not just getting you a high school diploma and making sure that you're going to be a contributing member of our community. So, I agree.
Can I go back to, so we were talking about the square footage was that just for the CTE program? Because we
No.
have, did it include East Bay Post High and everything?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
that was CAPS Adult Ed, East Bay Post High, CTE programs, daycare with an education strand, and community ed.
Obviously I was not listening, sorry.
You're good. Thank you. No, that's
And
good.
and that's saying 40,000 for CTE, we
Yeah.
may determine we don't need
That much.
40,000.
Thanks.
But we may determine we need more, too, for some of these other things.
Okay.
I mean, those are ballpark, those
Yeah,
are very, very
true,
ballpark.
yeah.
But 42 million goes right along with what we've been saying.
Mhm.
We're gonna probably be doing, so sounds about right. Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else they want to add or ask for or direct Wendy on?
I think I just thought I haven't even had time to process, but I think as we now process this and move forward, just we should be thoughtful of if we move forward with this plan, no matter what our boundary feasibility study says, like, is this plan separate enough from some of the other
Right.
things we're looking at with that study that we could feel confident moving forward before that boundary feasibility study is done? Or would there be enough things that could be affected by whatever that study shows that we would need to just kind of wait and see and make sure, so.
I feel like I am anxious to get some plan in place for Dixon. I hate to just leave it
Me too, I
open.
wanna make sure.
But I also think we do have some time. I mean, Boys and Girls Club's gonna be there through 26, right? January 26th. We have some time. We could coordinate it so the two timelines meet up just right.
Jason has a comment.
I was just gonna mention, and you've talked about it in many different ways, but as you look at this, when you do the feasibility study, you're gonna separate programs from the buildings. They're gonna be two separate things. So all the programming you're talking about, I think is great for the future for students. But maybe the buildings that we have currently meet the needs without having to build buildings. So I think it's just really tricky to not have the feasibility study done before looking at the next steps. And I know you'd like to do something right away with Dixon, but I think that is just something to continue to consider.
Yes, Gina?
Well, and I would agree, like, representing that area, we do need to have some kind of plan moving forward, but everybody that I've talked to would prefer that we do it thoughtfully, right? I feel sometimes like we're rushing a little bit, and there are reasons, like, I'm not saying we're doing it and it's the wrong thing to do, but we have other buildings that we need to put on the bond, there are other things that need to be done, but as far as my community goes, I think I can confidently say that we want a good decision, right?
Yeah,
We
for
want a direction, but I don't think we want a decision if it's gonna be super rushed, and then we're gonna regret that decision into the future. So I support what Jason just said and what everybody else has been saying.
So, on the subject of the feasibility study, has any of you signed the conflict of interest forms?
Oh gosh.
No.
I
I barely had time to
I
read
did
it.
print them off, so I will have you sign them, so I
Thank you
can
for being
send
here.
that to you.
It's in our email.
Well, I
I
will have
missed
you
it.
sign it today, and then I will send you all the
People send
information
both of them.
Yeah.
on the vendors.
I'm
I
sorry,
can't
I
keep
missed
up.
that email.
No,
I'm not
you're
keeping
fine.
up with emails or meetings.
It's all good.
Was that
That's
yesterday?
why I brought it up now, is
Yeah,
just to
I
make
was
sure
not
we got
in
it
the
all
email.
taken
I was
care of
gonna
while
ask you
everyone
that
was
while we
here.
were here.
So the next steps are?
I'm gonna put together a document, I'm gonna list the questions that I have so far, I'll start assigning them out to our team, noting that we have tried to instruct a lot of people to take a lot of time off in July.
Yeah.
So it'll be kinda hit and miss as to how fast we can put it together.
I think we just said we're not in a rush
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, we're in a rush.
So, and then if you want me to, I can work with Clay to start setting up some visits to some of these sites if you would like to do that. I think it's best to see them when they're in session, so you can actually see what's going on. But we could set those up for like September. Yes, you'll be a little more mobile.
I am teaching extra classes, but it might be full. I have to drop off all my grandkids.
Did you say we're gonna, are we gonna also look more detailed exact, more closer estimate of square footage?
Yeah, I'll get Clay to start
Okay.
pulling that information for sure.
Because in the end, with this more exact square footage, maybe it would work for the Timpanogos site, you know,
Yeah, it might.
so there's some things that we could look at overall.
Well, and similar to Gina's logic around like not rushing, talking about cell phone policies and things, looking at unintended consequences is a huge decision, and I agree that I think everyone wants us to be thoughtful and but also really transparent about
Yes.
where, like, if we're looking at this direction as what seems right now to make the most sense, but if we got data that said there are more cost-effective ways to solve this that would use our resources better, then we would have to think of something new.
Well said.
I also think we could ask some of our, you know, businesses, like what are the job areas that you feel like you don't have employees that are ready, you know?
I know Sheriff Smith said not very many people are going into the police academy,
Okay.
so we need more SROs instead of a guardian.
That is on Clay's list.
It's on the list, I like
Law
seeing that
enforcement.
actually,
Yeah.
I told Sheriff Smith if you would've told us we're in education, we can let the students know that's an option.
But I think those would be, you know, what are our high demand areas. I know we started I had no idea there was a transportation CTE pathway that helps with, I didn't realize that it isn't just driving the trucks, it's actually monitoring the system so that when the truck shows up at the warehouse, it's showing up at the right time, so the workers are there to unload the truck at the right time. And there's a huge coordination process that happens, and there's a whole CTE pathway that helps with that, and there were a ton of companies in Salt Lake County that support that, and so they were able to introduce that pathway, and they're hiring people out of the gate at $80K, and just with the high school diploma if they've gone through that certification. So it's just, I had no idea, like, you know, when you come from a college background, that's kind of what you traditionally think, right?
Right.
And so it takes some reframing of what that looks like.
Can we set up a time with MTech to maybe
Yes,
go
let's do
through
that.
the Provo one? And
Great idea.
I should know, but I do know that they're planning on expanding, so they bought the old courthouse.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they're
but
going like
and they're
floor by
going floor
floor.
by floor, and right now they've got the first floor done, almost the second floor done. But it would be good to see like what their offerings are and how we might be able to work with each
I
other.
love it.
Or what they plan to expand into, because
I don't wanna duplicate that
Right.
you don't wanna,
there.
Right.
duplicate anything there, or, yeah.
Cause they may be bringing the data analytics here. I don't know, I'm just,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
or
an
they're,
excellent point.
so.
Okay, we can do that.
Anyone else? Alright, everybody feel good about adjourning? If we're ready to adjourn? We feel like we have a good direction to go in? Okay. Alright, then is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
If you need us to meet in 2
So
hours,
the
we're
agendas
really
are
close.
listed on the third
Hey,
page.